Most people assume that a healed empath becomes gentler, more compassionate, and more open to the world. Carl discovered the opposite. When an empath fully heals, they don't turn into a saint, they become a fortress. Carl referred to this as shadow integration, and it alarmed him because he recognized a profound truth. The person who once absorbed everyone's pain, felt every emotion, and carried the weight of every room suddenly stops. They stop absorbing, they stop carrying, they stop bending, and when that happens, Carl found, they transform into some of the most psychologically powerful people on the planet. What occurs when someone who feels everything finally decides not to let it break them? Carl's clinical records reveal a consistent pattern across dozens of cases. Empaths came to his Zurich practice bearing identical wounds. They had spent their lives functioning as what Carl called emotional shock absorbers for toxic families, manipulative partners, and dysfunctional social systems. They absorbed anger to keep others calm. They absorbed suffering to spare others discomfort. They absorbed chaos to preserve others' illusions of peace. Carl noticed something that unsettled him as he documented his observations. These empaths weren't merely enduring abuse, they were memorizing it. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every lie, every emotional attack had been recorded in their minds with meticulous precision. They understood their abuser's triggers, insecurities, deepest fears, and hidden motivations better than the abusers themselves. They had mapped emotional patterns, identified psychological vulnerabilities, and documented behavioral cycles with astounding accuracy. Yet they had never acted on this knowledge until something finally pushed them beyond their breaking point. Carl recognized that the unhealed empath exists in a state of compulsive giving. They struggle to say no, set boundaries, or protect their own energy, having been conditioned to believe their worth comes from serving others. Society reinforces this, suggesting that their sensitivity is a gift meant to heal the world. Religious teachings encourage them to forgive endlessly, turn the other cheek, and sacrifice themselves for others. Family systems often exploit their readiness to absorb dysfunction, allowing everyone else to avoid confronting their own shadows. As a result, the unhealed empath becomes a psychological dumping ground, taking on toxic emotional burdens from those around them, while their inner world slowly suffocates under the weight of accumulated pain. Carl documented how this pattern systematically undermines empaths. First, they disconnect from their own emotions because they are preoccupied with managing everyone else's feelings. Next, manipulators repeatedly gaslight them, eroding their ability to trust their own perceptions. Eventually, they lose their sense of self entirely, becoming whatever others need while their authentic personality fades into the background. This continual absorption leads to what Carl called psychological fragmentation. The empath's consciousness becomes scattered across others' emotional experiences, making it impossible to locate their own center. They awaken feeling emotions that aren't theirs, carrying anxiety over problems they aren't responsible for, and guilt about boundaries they haven't even set. Carl observed that unhealed empaths often describe the sensation of living someone else's life, going through motions without true agency or choice. This fragmentation makes them highly vulnerable to manipulation, as their internal compass no longer guides them away from danger. Yet, Carl discovered that empaths have a hidden psychological mechanism that activates under extreme stress, which he named the clarity event. This moment arises when the empath's pattern recognition system finally overpowers their need to see the best in others. It is usually triggered by a deep betrayal, infidelity, financial manipulation, or emotional abuse from someone they trusted completely. The devastation is not solely in the betrayal itself, but in the painful awareness that they had perceived the warning signs all along, micro-expressions, subtle shifts in energy, but chose to ignore them. They could sense the emotional inconsistencies that revealed hidden motives, yet they often dismissed their own accurate insights because they wanted to believe in the person's goodness. The moment of clarity occurs when this internal conflict becomes unbearable. The empath can no longer ignore what they have known all along. At this point, Carl noted, a fundamental shift takes place in their psychology. Many assume empaths will break down, cry, or react emotionally when facing the truth. Abusers expect this reaction, having deliberately provoked it before, but what actually happens is startling. The empath becomes unnaturally calm, their emotional reactivity vanishing entirely. Carl described this as the moment the victim realizes they've been playing chess while everyone else thought it was checkers. The healed empath stops trying to convince others, stops explaining their perceptions, and stops defending their reality. Instead, they begin to apply the knowledge and insights they've been quietly gathering for years. Carl recorded this as one of the most profound psychological transformations he ever witnessed, the development of what he called differentiated perception. This state is not anxiety or paranoia. It is a level of accurate data processing few humans ever reach. Empaths are not broken. They are evolving alchemists. The Alchemist's Path offers exercises, Carl-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to transform overwhelm into clarity through Surreal Mind. The 236-page downloadable ebook is available now at surrealmind.com. Carl observed that empaths who fully integrate their shadow can immediately detect lies, uncover hidden agendas in minutes, and perceive psychological patterns invisible to others. They notice the depression behind forced smiles, the desperation beneath confident exteriors, and the collective shadow groups unconsciously choose to ignore. Unlike in their unhealed state, this awareness no longer overwhelms them. They process it consciously and trust what they see completely. They no longer second-guess their intuition or dismiss their gut feelings to please others. This leads to what Carl called psychological invincibility. A healed empath cannot be gaslighted because they trust their own reality. They cannot be manipulated as they recognize emotional games before they fully unfold. They cannot be broken, having already experienced profound lows and emerged stronger. Carl studied for years how this heightened perception functions in healed empaths. He discovered that their brains process social information across multiple channels at once. While most people focus mainly on spoken words, healed empaths simultaneously perceive body language, vocal tone, energy, unconscious motives, and systemic patterns. They do not do this analytically or consciously. Their nervous systems, shaped by years of surviving toxic environments, instinctively detect danger signals that others entirely miss. What initially developed as a trauma response now operates as a sophisticated early warning system. The key difference is that healed empaths trust this system rather than dismiss it as mere anxiety or overthinking. Carl also identified a phenomenon he called the mirror effect. People who once felt comfortable around the unhealed empath become uneasy in the presence of a healed one. Nothing in the empath's behavior changes. They remain calm, non-judgmental, and gentle, yet toxic individuals feel exposed. This occurs because the healed empath becomes what Carl described as a darkened mirror. They reflect people's true nature back to them without speaking a word. Manipulators see their own manipulation. Narcissists see their self-centeredness. Dishonest people see their deception. Carl explained this through the concept of participation mystique, but in reverse. Instead of absorbing others' unconscious traits, the healed empath now reflects them. Most people cannot face their own shadow being displayed so clearly. This is why toxic individuals instinctively avoid healed empaths. They cannot explain why they feel uneasy, but they sense their true selves reflected back. People sense that being around this individual makes them feel truly seen, sometimes in ways that are uncomfortable. The shift from compulsive giving to conscious choice embodies what Carl called strategic empathy. A healed empath retains the ability for deep compassion, genuine kindness, and sincere care for others. But now, empathy is exercised selectively. Boundaries are firmly established and protected. They have learned to safeguard their energy, to say no without guilt, to leave toxic situations without explanation, and to prioritize themselves unapologetically. Carl noted that this transformation can alarm those who previously relied on the empath's lack of boundaries. Family members who once used the empath as an emotional dumping ground suddenly find no outlet for their unprocessed pain. Partners who exploited the empath's tolerance for abuse now face someone unwilling to engage in dysfunctional dynamics. Friends who treated the empath as a free therapist encounter a person who values their own time and energy. The healed empath has not grown cold or unkind. They have simply stopped sacrificing their well-being to maintain others' comfort. Carl documented techniques that healed empaths naturally adopt to uphold boundaries. They create what he called psychological containers, temporary spaces to hold others' emotions without permanently absorbing them. They master compassionate detachment, caring without feeling, obligated to fix every problem. They develop energetic discernment, recognizing when someone seeks genuine connection versus when they are dumping emotional burdens. These skills do not reduce the empath's capacity for love. They enhance it, enabling sustained care without complete self-depletion. Throughout his research, Carl grappled with a troubling question. Could this transformation risk turning someone into a narcissist? The concern appeared reasonable. Both healed empaths and narcissists establish firm boundaries, refuse to absorb others' emotions, and maintain psychological distance from manipulation. However, Carl identified a key distinction. The narcissist projects their shadow onto others and remains unaware of their own darkness. In contrast, the healed empath has integrated their shadow and is fully conscious of their potential for harm. They understand exactly how to hurt someone because they've spent years observing human vulnerabilities. Their insight into manipulation comes from having experienced every toxic tactic firsthand. While they could inflict emotional pain with precise accuracy, they consciously choose peace instead. Carl noted that this deliberate choice is the source of their true power. The narcissist lacks empathy because they are oblivious to the inner worlds of others. The healed empath, however, possesses empathy but decides when and how to apply it. This choice transforms sensitivity from a weakness into a weapon under their control. Carl described the emergence of what he called warrior consciousness in healed empaths. This state combines the empath's natural sensitivity with a strategic capacity for action. The warrior empath still feels deeply, but they are no longer consumed by their emotions. They perceive everything, yet are no longer overwhelmed by it. They've learned to channel their awareness into conscious decisions instead of compulsive people-pleasing. Warrior consciousness manifests as an unwavering inner authority. The healed empath no longer seeks external validation for their perceptions. They trust their own reality without needing others' confirmation or permission. This internal certainty creates a psychological foundation that cannot be shaken by gaslighting, manipulation, or social pressure. The warrior empath becomes resistant to the tactics that once controlled them. Carl recognized that this consciousness goes beyond mere self-protection. It represents a full reorganization of the empath's relationship with their own power. In their unhealed state, empaths often fear their own strength because they've been taught that power corrupts and that truly good people must remain humble and self-effacing. Carl discovered that this mindset keeps empaths trapped in victimhood. A healed empath understands that power itself is neutral. Its morality depends on how it is used. They reclaim their strength not to dominate others, but to protect themselves and serve from a place of abundance rather than depletion. This shift allows them to become what Carl called benevolent warriors, individuals who wield power consciously in service of life, rather than unconsciously in service of dysfunction. The path from broken sponge to awakened warrior follows a pattern Carl observed across his clinical cases. First, recognition. The empath acknowledges suppressed aspects of their shadow, not just anger, but also intelligence, strength, and the right to exist without constantly serving others. They stop doubting their perceptions and start trusting their emotional intelligence as the sophisticated information system it truly is. Second, integration. The empath merges their light and shadow into what Carl called the complete self. They can be exceptionally kind to those who deserve it, and uncompromisingly precise with those who don't. Third, application. The healed empath learns to use their abilities strategically rather than defensively. They develop what Carl privately called psychological architecture, the skill to read, influence, and navigate human systems with remarkable precision. Finally, selective service. The integrated empath does not become cold or detached. Instead, they consciously share their gifts, helping other empaths transform while maintaining impenetrable boundaries against those who would exploit them. Carl recognized that society conditions empaths to fear their own power. Religious teachings warn against pride and self-assertion. Cultural messages equate sensitivity with weakness and boundary setting with selfishness. Family systems often punish empaths for refusing to absorb dysfunction. This creates what Carl called the perfect person problem. Empaths strive desperately to be good, to meet everyone's needs and maintain harmony at all costs. Carl found that wholeness, not goodness, should be the goal. The healed empath stops striving for perfection and instead aims for completeness. They accept their capacity for darkness, preventing projection onto others. They acknowledge their potential for cruelty, allowing them to recognize it clearly in others. They fully integrate their shadow, eliminating the blind spots manipulators exploit. This integration creates what Carl called the individuated self, a person who has moved beyond collective unconscious programming to claim psychological sovereignty. The presence of a healed empath influences entire social systems, not just individual relationships. Carl documented how the transformation of healed empaths compels those around them to evolve or reveal their true nature. Healthy individuals gain strength from observing a healed empath. They witness someone who maintains boundaries without cruelty, prioritizes themselves without apology, and trusts their own perceptions without arrogance. This example empowers healthy people to cultivate their own inner authority. Toxic individuals, on the other hand, reveal themselves through desperate attempts to pull the healed empath back into old patterns. They use every manipulation tactic at their disposal: guilt, tripping, gaslighting, and even recruiting others to pressure the empath into resuming their previous role. When these tactics fail, toxic people often escalate to direct attacks, attempting to punish the empath for no longer participating in dysfunction. Carl noted that this escalation actually serves as a protective mechanism, clearly exposing who cannot be trusted. Carl also identified what he called negative synchronicity in unhealed empaths. They unconsciously orchestrate situations that repeat their original trauma patterns, drawing narcissists, manipulators, and emotional vampires without understanding why. In contrast, healed empaths experience positive synchronicity. They begin attracting individuals who value authenticity, respect boundaries, and appreciate depth. Carl recognized that this shift occurs because the healed empath no longer emits the energetic signature of a victim. Instead, they radiate self-possession rather than self-sacrifice, projecting strength rather than availability for exploitation. This energetic shift naturally repels toxic individuals before relationships even begin, while drawing conscious people capable of genuine reciprocity. The question Carl examined most closely was whether empaths could sustain their healing permanently or risk regression under stress. His clinical observations offered a clear answer. Empaths who consciously integrate their shadow maintain their transformation long-term. Unlike temporary coping mechanisms that crumble under pressure, shadow integration restructures the personality at a fundamental level. The healed empath retains the ability to set boundaries during crises and does not revert to people-pleasing when faced with manipulation. The psychological foundation they've built remains strong because it is rooted in accepting reality rather than clinging to illusions. Carl documented cases of integrated empaths who navigated intense life challenges, betrayals in relationships, and professional setbacks without losing their inner authority. Once one sees through the veil of the collective unconscious, Carl noted, you cannot unsee it. Once you've reclaimed your power, you cannot unknow your own strength. He believed that healed empaths play a vital role in the evolution of human consciousness. They embody what humanity could become when sensitivity is integrated with strength, compassion with boundaries, and feeling with conscious choice. In contrast, unhealed empaths are often overwhelmed by a world that exploits their sensitivity. Healed empaths transform their sensitivity into a superpower that cannot be used against them. Carl viewed this transformation as essential not only for individual well-being, but also for collective evolution. As more empaths heal and embrace their power, they form a network of psychologically resilient individuals who cannot be manipulated by the unconscious forces influencing much of humanity. This network acts as a counterbalance to the collective shadow, offering conscious resistance to mass manipulation and demonstrating what integrated humanity can look like. The healed empath achieves what Carl called love with boundaries. They can care deeply while fully protecting themselves. They can experience emotions without being overwhelmed and observe the world without turning cynical. They understand that true compassion requires self-protection. Genuine kindness includes being kind to oneself, and authentic service honors one's own needs. This integration resolves the false tension between selfishness and selflessness. Healed empaths transcend both extremes by consciously deciding where to direct their energy. They are neither selfless martyrs sacrificing themselves for others, nor selfish individuals exploiting others for personal gain. Instead, they are sovereign individuals who engage with the world intentionally while maintaining their psychological integrity. Carl's case files show that healed empaths often undergo a profound shift in how they perceive their past pain. Rather than seeing their suffering as meaningless trauma, they start to view it as the crucible that shaped their psychological strength. Every betrayal fostered discernment, every manipulation refined their ability to recognize patterns. Every instance of gaslighting strengthened their commitment to trusting their own reality. Carl noted that this reframing does not diminish the harm they endured. Instead, it converts that harm into wisdom that can protect both themselves and others in the future. The healed empath becomes living evidence that even the worst experiences can become the greatest teachers if the lessons are consciously drawn. Carl's ultimate insight about healed empaths continues to resonate in psychology today. These individuals didn't transform into different people. They became who they were beneath external conditioning. Every empath holds the potential to become psychologically resilient. The sensitivity once perceived as a curse is actually a gift that requires conscious cultivation. The ability to deeply feel becomes a superpower when paired with the wisdom to decide where to invest your energy. The capacity to see through people's masks acts as a protective shield once you trust your perception. The journey from victim to warrior isn't about losing empathy. It's about gaining deliberate control over how you use empathic abilities. Carl discovered that the kindest people aren't weak. They are weapons in the making. And once tempered by betrayal and shadow integration, they become unstoppable forces that cannot be controlled, manipulated, or broken. Your sensitivity is not a weakness, it is your weapon. The moment you learn to harness it consciously is the moment you become truly powerful, not as a threat to the innocent, but as a force against those who would misuse your gifts. This is exactly what the world needs more of. Empaths who understand their value, trust their intuition, and refuse to dim their light for anyone's comfort. The real question isn't whether you'll change, it's whether you'll choose to transform consciously or let life push you into it. Carl's research shows that transformation is unavoidable for every empath. You will either intentionally integrate your shadow through inner work, or life will break you down until rebuilding yourself stronger becomes the only option. Either way, awakening is inevitable. The only variable is how much avoidable suffering you'll experience before deciding to heal. If this resonates with you, if you're ready to stop being everyone's emotional shock absorber and start claiming your sovereignty, comment below. I choose conscious transformation. Share where you are in your healing journey. Are you still in the unhealed stage, carrying everyone else's pain? Are you in the clarity phase, finally seeing what you've always known? Or have you already integrated your shadow and become the warrior empath Carl described? In The Alchemist's Path, Perception Training for Empaths, you'll learn to turn overwhelm into wisdom through practical exercises, inspired boundaries, and structured perception training. The guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Authored by Surreal Mind, this 236-page, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook is available now.